Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing fabulously well. Go and get yourself an effervescent sparkling drink or a warm hot cup of cocoa or coffee, because I've got an amazing story for you tonight. And as I always say, nothing in this world beats a good story. And you're looking at the right channel if that's what you want to listen to. So before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, she comes out at night when the small town sleeps, and all that can be heard is the sound of crickets and frogs that serenade the night with their soulful but mellow orchestral music. Their cheerful trills and croaks have become to her like unlikely friends. She is well acquainted with the night, as much as the coyotes, raccoons and foxes that have sometimes crossed her path. Many that have become familiar to her idiosyncratic presence that even they cannot fathom or comprehend. Most humans abandon the night like something to fear, but this young woman seizes it with open arms, welcomes it and holds it close to her in a loving embrace, for it writes her a doctor's script of freedom, safety and comfort. Much like her indigenous nightly friends that she often encounters, she likes to sink discreetly into the shadows, disappearing into obscurity, remaining unobserved, unseen, undetected by curious prying eyes. For the darkness has become a motherly matriarch towards her that does not judge her or single her out for being different. When she ventures out of her grandmother's apartment, situated above the nail bar in town, that is owned by her sister Ruth, she ventures out very quietly, discreetly, accessing the stairwell at the back, and even her sneakers whisper silently on the steps, and not even a squeak is imparted or heard, as she graciously glides down those steps one by one, without even making a sound. She ambles gracefully down the streets, her head hidden beneath the soft flapping folds of her hoodie, so that to anyone that might pass her by, they will not see her clearly. No one would pay her much attention, and that is what she wants, for she does not want to be seen. She does not want to be observed, nor does she want to be noticed. The lighted wire-framed figurine of the caricature lady in the nail bar, with the neon pink sign in her hands that reads nails, grabs her attention, as it flashes brightly through the shop window panes, like a Christmas tree, on and off, on and off, on and off. She can see a long row of pink and gold upholstered couches, and several rows of glass tables, where her sister's clients sit for manicures and pedicures at the salon. It's become a thriving, prosperous business for her sister Ruth, bringing the family much financial support. The street is silent. It's about 2:00 in the morning. The rounded bulbs of light, perched elegantly on the long vertical poles of the street lamps, cast a bright enough illumination for her to see very clearly. The silence is golden, as she navigates her way past coffee shops, boutiques and restaurants, all that she knows rather well. There isn't a solitary soul in sight. She likes it this way, for she feels cocooned in safety and security when nobody is around. When she sees a person merely glance in her direction, even though she is inconspicuous, hiding surreptitiously behind the velvety cover of her hoodie, she'll still hyperventilate, breathe heavily, and sweat will come pouring down her face in raindrops. She can't bear to be looked at. There's a breeze nuzzling her skin, kissing her gently with cool air, which makes her feel vibrantly alive. She is trapped in an apartment all day, with only her grandmother and daytime TV for company, along with the occasional visit from Ruth taking a swift coffee break from the nail bar downstairs, who spills all the beans on the comings and goings in town. As much like a hairdresser, Ruth is updated regularly about the locals in town, who's getting a divorce, who's getting married, who's having a baby, and sometimes, if she's lucky, the gossip might actually be juicier. Sometimes she sits upstairs, and with her binoculars pinned on the street, she entertains herself by watching the comings and goings of the locals in town. She observes people talking on street corners, laughing and chatting garrulously together,
People walking dogs down the sidewalk, conveniently looking away when the dog lifts up its legs to anoint a local dustbin. People carrying bags of heavy shopping in their hands. Cars parking across the street corner. Sometimes she doesn't recognise the people. Sometimes she does. She wonders if they remember her at all. Or has she been long since forgotten? Out of sight, out of mind, she concludes to herself. She used to be pretty once. Very pretty, as it happens. Indeed, she used to turn heads wherever she went. But not any more. Those days are like a blot on the horizon, or a bird dropping left behind on a windscreen, or a long, distant memory. She knows one thing with certainty, like she knows that the sky is blue, that she'll never be beautiful again. Well, not in the conventional way. Not in the way that the world epitomizes beauty. It would be enough just to look normal. She'd settle for that any day of the week. But looking normal has eluded her, escaped her grasp like a dandelion seed blowing away in a feisty wind. Impossible to catch. There was a time looking in the mirror was actually a regular event for her, but not any more, for she has not looked in a mirror for months. It pains her to even look at herself, to see the damage on the left-hand side of her face. Yet she knows that given her life over again, if she could go back in the pages of time, she would have never done things differently, not even for a second. At the time, Azalea's family had lived in a semi-detached house in town, not too far away from the nail bar. But one night, something quite dreadful happened, and that haunting night is etched on her mind like an indelible tattoo that cannot be erased. When she was a young girl, she had been terrified of fire, so much more so than anything else, and had promptly decided that being burnt alive was the worst possible thing that could ever happen to a human being. She couldn't even look at a wildfire on television without the scene causing her great distress. But one day, her worst fears would come to fruition. It had been an ordinary, unexceptional evening, when she and her sister Ruth had retired to bed earlier than usual. At the time, she was only 22 years old. Ruth was 25. Little Pixie, their French bulldog, was lying at the bottom of her bed fast asleep, snoring loudly. He made the cutest nasal snores when he was asleep, which made the girls laugh. He was quite the little comical character, with his flat pug-like nose and his expressive dark, soulful eyes. Both girls knew exactly what their father intended to do this evening. They had been warned by him that they would possibly hear Hazel Montgomery's aggrieved voice, as she screamed indignantly at him. He pretty much was prepared for a volatile altercation with the disagreeable, capricious woman, who had such a short fuse on her that when she lit up, she exploded like a firework. The children's mother had died when they were very young, after having an asthmatic attack in her car, which veered off the edge of the road, rolling down a steep embankment, where she was killed on impact. The asthma attack had come on so suddenly, it impeded her ability to control the car in time. She had been struggling desperately to breathe, and one thing led to another, with tragic consequences. It had taken her poor father years to come to terms with his wife's fortuitous death. It was only over the last year her father had been set up on a date with Hazel Montgomery by a well-meaning friend in town, who had thought that the kindly gentleman deserved to have a companion. At first, the couple had hit it off superbly. It seemed that Hazel loved everything that her father enjoyed, echoing his taste in everything, from music, food, books, television programs, and even sports. For a short while he thought he'd found a soulmate, of a sort. Not that anyone could ever replace their mother, but this woman shone brightly on their lives, like a warm, twinkling, all-embracing sunshine, and even they had at first warmed to her, as in the beginning she had been quite charming. But then slowly and surely the cracks began to show in Hazel's veneer, and the true personality came out, and it wasn't pretty, almost like an ugly sea creature emerging from a shell. At first the shell gave you the impression that what lay beneath it was promisingly beautiful, but not so, for this shell was harbouring a monster. It was devoid of any shimmering pearls. The woman at first, who had seemed so gentle and sweet, began to groan, moan, and really bully their father, until he'd had quite enough of her. "I'm ending it with that woman tonight," he told his two delighted children. I'm quite sure she's going to have a tantrum. So if you hear her screaming at the top of her voice, don't you worry your pretty heads about a thing. Just carry on sleeping. I've been putting off doing this for ages. It's called procrastination. But I need to do it now. I need to nip it in the bud. If well-meaning townsfolk hadn't tried to match me up with this crackpot, I wouldn't have to deal with her tonight.
Good luck, Dad, says Ruth, giving him a big hug. I'm sure you'll be very nice to her, Dad. I think all you should do is tell her that she's a very attractive woman, because you need to make sure she feels good about herself, but that you're still desperately in love with your wife who died, and you're just not capable of sharing your heart with another woman, that you're not ready for that.
That's a good idea, Ruth. That's what I will say to her. But your words are true. Apart from Hazel being attractive, of course. But sometimes, for the greater good, white lies need to be told.
The two inseparable sisters shared a very close bond together, as losing their mother so young had meant they became devoted, thick as thieves, insisting in sharing the upstairs bedroom together. They both retreated upstairs quietly, their hearts heavy for their father. They both knew breaking up with the likes of Hazel Montgomery was going to be a monumental task, as that temperamental, erratic woman would likely burst into an obsequious rage. The two girls slept side by side, in opposite single beds, both girls falling fast asleep, their nightly slumber rudely interrupted by Hazel's strident, ear-piercing, shrieking voice that echoed through the house like a shrill ambulance siren. "So you're dumping me, is that it? After all I've done for you and your kids?"
I'm sorry, Hazel. You and me, we're not working out. I think it's because I'm still desperately in love with my wife.
Poppycock, Julian. Your wife died over 16 years ago. You're saying you haven't moved on? I've never heard anything so ridiculous in my life. You're just looking for excuses just so that you can end it with me. I know that is what this is about, isn't it?
That's exactly what I'm saying, Hazel. It doesn't matter how long ago my wife died. That's irrelevant. She was the love of my life. I can't simply replace her.
So I'm not good enough for you anymore. Is that what you're saying?
Why is it always about you, Hazel? This is not personal. It's not remotely about you. It's all about me. It's about the fact that I'm not ready for a new relationship. Things have been rocky between us for quite a while. You're always angry, volatile, temperamental, having little hissy fits here and there, and quite frankly bullying me all the time. Relationships should not be like this. We're not good for each other, Hazel. We bring the worst out in each other. I just think we need to call it quits.
How dare you, Julian? How dare you? We've been together for a year now, and you never said a thing until now. Now you tell me all this, and I've invested so much in us.
I did want to say something earlier. I really did, but you made it very difficult for me.
But you were too much of a wuss. Is that what you're saying? Too much of a wuss?
I didn't want to hurt your feelings, Hazel, if you must know. Otherwise, I would have ended it with you a long time ago. In truth, you're probably right. I was a wuss. I just didn't want to hurt your feelings.
It's too late for that, Julian. I invested in you, in your children, and now you're ditching me like I'm nothing. You make me sick, Julian. You and your pathetic children. You all make me sick. In truth, I never liked your children very much, but I was willing to put up with them for your sake. But you're pathetic. I hate you. I wish you were dead. You're not going to get away with treating me like this, Julian. You have no idea what I'm capable of, but you'll soon find out, and you'll rue the day that you ever spoke to me like this. You hear what I'm saying? You will rue the day.
Hazel, if you're saying what I think you're saying, and that you want revenge on me, isn't that silly? Let's be adults about this. We can remain friends. I would like that very much indeed, and so would my children.
Friends? I'll never be your friend, Julian. Not now, not ever. I hate you. Did you hear what I said? I hate you. They could hear some smashing sounds that ominously gave them the distinct impression
that Hazel was having a hissy fit, throwing dishes around the kitchen, like you would hear at a Greek family wedding. Azalea was sure from all the clinking, crashing and walloping sounds there would not be a single plate left in the kitchen cabinet anymore, and the kitchen floor was lightly covered precariously in a confetti of fractured, very jagged-looking broken china. Then quite suddenly the front door slammed, and Ruth ran over to the sash window, lifting up the wooden panel to peer outside. She watched the furious figure of Hazel Montgomery dashing out of their semi-detached house towards her bright pink truck, parked on the opposite side of the street. Her whole body wobbled with indignation, and she looked up at their house, waving a fist at it in a gesture of a boxer punching a boxing bag. She was seething and champing at the bit, like an unbridled horse, and even under the lamplights of the street, she looked like her nostrils were actually flaring. "I'll get you back, Julian!" she screamed into the night, climbing back into her car and driving away at breakneck speed, her car outwardly expressing her grievances. "Dad's done it," said Ruth proudly. "He's only gone and done it. I'm so pleased for him, Azalea. He must be so relieved. She's finally gone from our lives." But her words were spoken too soon, as a short while later, Hazel Montgomery was back knocking on the front door again. Her knocks were aggressive, very determined. "Oh, God, you're not going to believe this, Azalea. She's only come back again," says Ruth. "That woman, she cannot take no for an answer. What the hell is wrong with her?" They heard a shuffling sound, her father saying, No, that's not necessary, Hazel. No, let's talk about this." Everything goes very quiet. Moments later, they hear Hazel going back to her truck and driving away, so they think all is well. So Azalea and her sister drift off to sleep. Azalea is awakened to the smell of smoke and shafts of icy cold fresh air bursting obtrusively through the bedroom. She wakes up coughing and spluttering as there's smoke in her lungs, and glances towards the landing from her bed as the bedroom door is wide open. She's horrified to see the passageway is consumed by flames that are darting rambunctiously through the sweeping staircase. She can hear the flames pop, sizzle, roar, snap and splutter. And the wood is folding, melting, curling. Everything is being rapidly destroyed by the all-consuming heat of the staircase that is disappearing in front of their very eyes, as it's monopolized by this assiduous, pugnacious fire. There's a fireman peering at them through the now fully open sash window. He shouts down to the fireman on the truck below. "2 girls up here, still alive, still breathing." He's standing on a ladder. "Your house is on fire, young ladies. You better get out now before it's too late. This is the only room in the house that isn't up in smoke yet. But in any second now it will be engulfed in flames. So for God's sake, hurry up. The house is burning down. The fire is out of control." "What about my dad?" says Azalea. "We've got him," says the fireman. "Now hurry. We haven't got any time to lose." Azalea is heartily relieved. Thank God her father's all right. That's all she needs to concern herself about. Ruth, whom appears to be in a stunned stupor, is not saying a single word. She allows herself to be guided down the ladder, and then it's Azalea's turn. "Hurry up," says the fireman. "Hurry up. We haven't got any time to waste." Fire blasts through the room like an unwanted gatecrasher. It whooshes and glides over the floor in a long yellow stream of ebullient flames, with such a powerful, thrustful force that the room feels like a morgue incinerator. Azalea remembers her little dog Pixie. "I can't come without Pixie." "Who's Pixie?" asked the fireman. "My dog." "It's too late for little Pixie," says the fireman. "You need to save yourself. This room is not stable. It'll come down in any second." Azalea doesn't listen. She has to find Pixie, and there he is, cowering under the bed, petrified out of his skull. She grabs Pixie, who trembles and shakes in her arms. The poor dog is absolutely terrified. She hands him to the fireman, who passes him down to the fireman below him. But those extra minutes cost her big time, for the raging heat of this insufferable inferno spares no mercy, as the fire is now whipping up only yards away from her feet, at 6 feet off the ground, beginning to fry one side of Azalea's face like a steak, while her clothes begin to melt and stick to her skin. Before she knows it, she's been ferried down the ladder to safety by the fireman, and a blanket is thrown over her body as a fire retardant, and to subdue the smoke now rising from her, like the smoke from a chimney. The pain is excruciating. She can smell burnt meat. Then she begins to slip into shock as she collapses and finally remembers no more. She is rushed to hospital and wakes up in the burns unit, where she receives extensive care for her wounds, skin grafts, pain management, along with professional counselling. When she first looks at the left-hand side of her face, when the nurse gives her a mirror, she's astounded. She no longer recognises the face staring back at her. Her eyes fill with tears as she runs her hand down the left cheek, where she feels the pits, the hollows, the furrows, the jagged thick bumps caused from the angry scarring. She notices she no longer has much left of her ears, and the scars are a deep crimson blue colour. They're ugly, offensive, like a blight on the landscape of her face. She shudders with horror. "This isn't me! This isn't me! I don't know this face anymore!" "Sweetheart, I know it looks terribly bad," says the nurse, taking her hand and giving it a tight squeeze. "But you'll receive many more operations and skin surgeries, and I'm sure in time it won't look quite so bad as it does now." "I'll never be pretty again. I wouldn't mind looking normal, but these scars, they're so unsightly. I know people will just stare at me." "If they haven't got anything better to do than stare at you, you should feel sorry for them, if their lives are so shallow. And if they do stare at you, just hold your head up high. You've got nothing to feel ashamed of." When Azalea finally came out of hospital, she was given the very grave news. The news the family had kept clandestinely from her, as they didn't want to jeopardise her healing. None of the smoke detectors in the house had worked, which in itself was an enigmatic mystery. It would seem that her father had been killed in the house fire. Hazel Montgomery had doused him with petrol that night. The whole house had been set on fire. If their bedroom had not been at the furthest corner of the house, both Ruth and her sister Azalea would definitely have perished. Hazel Montgomery was now in a mental facility, receiving medical treatment for all kinds of psychological disorders. Azalea firmly believed that she was a narcissistic personality type who couldn't handle any kind of rejection. Azalea was thrilled that Pixie had been saved. She adored that dog. And it was like he became her very best friend, for he knew she had saved his life, and the bond between the both of them had grown exponentially since the event. When Azalea returned home, she had to grieve not only the loss of her father, but the loss of the girl she had once been, and that was very hard for her to have to do. She did not recognise the girl staring back at her in the mirror. At the time she had a boyfriend who, on seeing her scars, retreated from her life in horror, never to be seen again. Azalea would never forget the look he gave her. It was like he was saying, "My God, you're ugly. I don't want to be seen around with you." The two sisters both moved in with their grandmother, and Ruth opened up her nail bar underneath the apartment. But the moment that Azalea faced the world with her scarred face, people talked, they whispered, they giggled, they taunted, and stared. Once she even heard a little kid saying, Mummy, look at that girl's ugly face. She's got an ugly face, Mummy." The mother had said, "Shh, don't be so rude." She tried to silence her kid by telling him to be quiet, but Azalea had heard it all, and it had really, really hurt. That was the final straw for her, and in her self-conscious, defeated state, Azalea had retreated indoors, and now she only ever went outdoors when the rest of the world was fast asleep. That way she could get up close and personal to nature, without being in the full view and scrutiny of judgmental, condemning spectators who would lightly ogle and stare at her unsightly burns, and she couldn't face the prospect of being a freak show for them. "Honestly, Azalea," her grandmother had said, "it's not as bad as it looks, honey, and once you've seen it, you get used to it, you know. When I look at you, Azalea, I don't see your burns anymore, but I see the Azalea I know and love. My beautiful, beautiful granddaughter. That's what I see." "I'm not beautiful, Granny. I wish you wouldn't say that. I know I'm a freak." "You're a hero. Don't you ever talk about yourself like that. You're not a freak. You saved Pixie's life. You did that. You should be proud of yourself, Azalea. But I really wish you wouldn't hide yourself away from the world like this. It's not good. It's not healthy for you. It's just terrible to see you like this. It grieves my heart. So you want me to go out there, do you? Listen to people passing comment over me? You want me to provide a freak show for people, like the bearded lady or something in the travelling circus? Or on Ripley's Believe It or Not? Don't be like that, Azalea. Many of the locals in town may stare at you in the beginning. I admit that. But in the end, people will get used to you. If you see something often enough, it no longer becomes a topic of conversation. Imagine if every day you go into town and you see a man with a purple face. The first few times you're going to stare at him, as you haven't seen a man with a purple face before, and you're curious and inquisitive about it. But after a while you'll walk past him without even giving him a second glance, because now you're used to the man with the purple face. I believe that's how it'll be for you, Azalea. People will only stare when they're curious and intrigued. Or disgusted, interjects Azalea. If people will make fun of a fat, obese person wobbling down a street, how much more are they going to pass commentary on me? Who knows what they will call me? Scarface, probably. I don't want to hear them speak about me like that. It really, really hurts, Granny. Of course it hurts, sweetheart. I do understand that. I think you should have some online counselling. But you can't spend your life being disconnected from society. As I keep telling you, it's not healthy for you. It would seem as time passed by, Azalea's grandmother accepted that Azalea didn't want to face people again. She had been in hospital for a few more skin grafts, but the improvements were so minimal. Many locals asked after her, and her grandmother lied on her account, claiming that Azalea was living in another state with a boyfriend. Oh, I heard what happened to her. Poor thing, getting third-degree burns like that. I can't imagine what the poor girl's been through. Good for her moving on with her life, despite everything that's transpired. I certainly salute her for her courage. Little did the locals know that Azalea was living behind closed doors, and like Count Dracula, when the world slept, she'd venture out, but usually she did not take Pixie with her, as at 2 o'clock in the morning he was usually lying fast asleep on her bed, but sometimes at night he had accompanied her on a walk or two, but not tonight. Azalea's account. I never knew what real pain was, until the left-hand side of my body was burnt. I can't describe the pain to you. It's beyond even putting into words. There were times I lost the desire to live, as a pain can be so insufferable that sometimes death seems like a preferable option, a release from the dreadful pain. Granted, the hospital tried to manage the pain for me, but sometimes the pain would override the medications, like a rambunctious wave getting way out of control and shooting above the rocks. Many burns patients don't recover from their injuries. People can die from serious burns, you know. Maybe sometimes they lose the will to live along the way. Who knows? Many times I was drifting on that same boat of hopelessness, wondering whether fighting through the pain and all the disfigurement was actually worth it. But despite everything that happened on that inauspicious night, I wouldn't have changed a thing, even if I could rewind the clock back again. I wish I could have saved my father, though. I wish I'd checked up on him after Hazel left the house that night. Maybe none of this would have happened then. But even if my father had survived, doubtless he would have had dreadful burning. And sometimes in that situation, dying can actually be a gift. Believe me, I know what I'm talking about. Who knew that Hazel Montgomery would be so offended with my father breaking up with her that she would return to our house, dousing him with petrol, setting him alight with fire? I still maintain that that has got to be the worst way to die. If you think of the depictions of hell in the Bible, it's described as a pit of fire, not a pit of ice, nor a pit of water, or a windstorm, or any other hazard like that, because fire is the worst form of eternal punishment. That's why during the 9/11 disaster, people jumped out of burning buildings rather than facing the wrath of the searing, unforgiving heat, the black smoke, the roaring flames. I have an insight of what those people went through. I was able to save Pixie's life, and that dog means the entire world to me. And I wouldn't have been happy living with the guilt of not saving him and saving myself. Pixie knew without a shadow of a doubt that I'd saved his life that night, as dogs are remarkably clever. And let's just say that dog has been a blessing in my lonely life. while I have whiled away the solitary days in my grandmother's apartment. I have always found things to do, like making jams for my grandmother to sell at the farmer's market, and I've been teaching myself to make candles, but life hasn't always been easy, and friends are like a hazy memory from the past. I've run away from that part of my life, retreated into my shell, scurried away to hide in the dark shadows, as that seemed like the best thing to do. All my life I had been pretty. I had no idea what it was like to feel so self-conscious, so conspicuously ugly, that you wanted the ground to swallow you whole. How I wished I could be an invisible man, walking through the people in town, with no one knowing I was there. My grandmother and Sister Ruth were deep sleepers. They were obliviously unaware of my nighttime activities, and I didn't want to inform them of what I got up to at night. I knew my grandmother would lose precious sleep worrying about me, walking around in the dark. I carried a long bag over my shoulders that contained a torch, bear spray, and a flask of hot chocolate. I knew I would go mad cooped up in the house on my own without getting fresh air, so I always looked forward to the early morning hours when the whole world was fast asleep and I could become alive again. On this particular night, it was an ordinary night, much like any other. I instinctively woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning, like clockwork. My dog is lying curled up at the foot of my bed. He lifts up his head to look at me briefly, then retracts back to his original position and continues to snore. I rise out of my bed. I slipped quietly down the staircase, past the window that overlooks the street, allowing a generous amount of moonlight to filter into the apartment, so I can see my way clearly down those steps. I creep cautiously into the kitchen to put on the light, while I boil a kettle to make myself some hot chocolate in a flask. I quickly pull out my duffel bag that I hide discreetly in the closet in the entrance hall, where I keep my clothes and my bag that I use for my nighttime soirees. I quickly get dressed in the kitchen, throwing my pyjamas into the duffel bag and replacing it in the hallway closet. I fill up my flask with hot chocolate, and then I'm good to go. I quickly open the side door of the kitchen, locking it behind me, slipping the key into my pocket. I glide down the stairwell, and soon I'm on the street below. There is a cool breeze blowing, a soft moonlight filtering through the canopy. It's a gorgeous night. My face is safely buried behind my hoodie. There is not a single soul in sight. I can hear the crickets and frogs. I walk quickly past boutiques, coffee shops, and I cross the long ribbon of asphalt to the wood grove beyond. This is my secret place, the place I like to hang out at night. In the beginning it was daunting walking through the woods at night, but not anymore. It's like my eyes have adjusted to the light, grown accustomed to the darkness. I pull away my hoodie to expose my face. I am safe here, as only the animals will see me, and they never notice my unsightly scars. And even if they did, they would never dare pass judgment. Animals don't judge like that. This is what makes them life's little angels. With my torch, I walk through the woods, thoroughly enjoying the feeling of crunching the leaf litter and twigs under the rubber of my boots. I see a few raccoons running past me. They stop for a brief moment to look at me, and we almost exchange hypothetical hellos. When I first used to enter the woodgrove, they would bolt past me in a tearing hurry, but not anymore. They've almost acclimatized to my presence. I feel alive walking through the woods, even though everything is shrouded in darkness, and the tall, towering silhouettes of the trees are swallowed up by the dusky haze of this ambiguous twilight, their leafy boughs indeterminate and very vague. The forest is tenebrous, as not much moonlight escapes through the canopy of the trees, but the light of my torch is more than enough, and it navigates the way. I notice that everything has grown eerily quiet, so quiet that you can hear a pin drop. Even the boughs of the trees have stopped jiggling. The cool wind has become subdued, as if repressed by the sombre gloominess of the energy tonight. Even the sounds of the crickets and frogs have grown muted, low-key, and suddenly they stop their trill. It's in this moment that a chill runs down my spine. I've never known the woods to feel as foreboding and bodeful as this, but something is out of sync, out of alignment, so to speak. It feels really off. I also get the sense that I'm being watched. I've had this feeling before when some indigenous nightly animal has bounced out of the shadows, watching me cautiously to ensure that I do not impose a threat. But this is different, very different. Whatever is staring at me from the looming dark shadows possesses a festering, clawing energy that certainly gives me the heebie-jeebies. It's making my skin crawl and telling me to get the hell out of here if I know what's good for me. And that is when I see her. It's a little girl. I'm astonished, as she's no more than 4 or 5 years old. I'm so befuddled to see a little girl in the middle of the woodgrove at night. I'm concerned about her welfare, that I'm not even thinking about my burns or having been seen by someone. I'm troubled about this girl. Who is she? Where are her parents? What is she doing in the middle of the woodgrove at this God-forsaken hour of the early morning? It makes no sense at all. I don't understand this. She's so innocent, so vulnerable. She clearly needs my help. The little girl puts her fingers on her lips and whispers, "They mustn't see us. They mustn't see us. They mustn't hear us. They mustn't hear us." I'm so confounded, as I don't say a thing. The little girl is beckoning for me to follow her. I should be asking her who she is, what she's doing in the woodgrove, where her parents are. But it's like this little girl has locked me under a beguiling spell. And I follow her, almost like a lamb to the slaughter, as there is something not quite right about her. But it's like I'm magnetically drawn towards her. The next thing I know is I hear these thumping feet moving hastily towards me. But my eyes remain steadily focused on the girl, who continues to beckon to me. Suddenly, a large hand seizes me, and literally is waving thick sausage-sized fingers in front of my eyes, almost as if trying to get me out of a trance-like state. I find myself looking up into the eyes of a massive Bigfoot. I want to scream, but I can't. This thing is gargantuan. I think I'm going to pass out from sheer shock. But when I look into the creature's eyes more intently, I see only kindness and concern within their depths. There are no words to describe this Bigfoot to you, other than the fact that he made me feel like a tiny doll. He was so powerfully built, with shoulders that bubbled with muscle. He was covered with long, shaggy hair, and his face was like that of a human, with prominent cheekbones, a flat nose, square jawline, a heavily furrowed brow. He was easily over 8 foot tall, with overlong arms, and a cone-shaped head. He smelt strongly of pine. The creature grabs me by my arm, and walks me hurriedly through the woods, until we're facing the road that overlooks the shopping arcade. I hear in my head, "Not safe, not safe." I look up at the Bigfoot and say, "Why? Who is she? What is she?" "She's not a little girl," the words come into my head. "She's evil. She's trying to destroy you." The moonlight has cascaded onto my face, lighting up the left-hand side of my cheek, and the creature catches sight of my scarring. He stops for a moment, examining my face, looking into my eyes, and I get the sense that he's stepped into my life and is rewinding my life story in his mind. The next thing I know, he's stroking my cheek, marvelling at the pits of my scar. "War wound," he says in my head. "You should be proud of your war wound, for it does not define you. It makes you." And after that, he guides me across the road and watches me walking away. I could see him standing there for a very long time, until he was gone from my sight. I marvelled at what this intelligent Bigfoot had actually spoken to me, how he had intervened to rescue me from a little girl who clearly was not what she appeared to be. But what was she? An evil spirit or something? I thought about the Bigfoot's poignant words he told me, that my wound was something to be proud of, as it made me who I am today. And his words quite literally changed my life, as I realised he was absolutely right. I surprised my sister and my grandmother by going out into the public, and whenever anyone whispered or passed comment, I would say, "You're talking about my scar here, on the left-hand side of my cheek. I got that from my house burning down on fire." And instead of people being mean to me, they gathered around me to hear my story. And I realised that the Bigfoot was right. I should wear my scars with pride. Believe it or not, I'm now a married woman with 3 children of my own. Ironically, I met my husband in a supermarket. He was one of those people staring at my scar for a little bit too long than he should have been. "This old thing," I said to him, "it's a burn I received from escaping a burning house." "Oh, I'm sorry," says the stranger. "I didn't mean to be so rude. I didn't mean to stare. I was just curious about what happened to you. Can I take you for a coffee?" I agreed. I told him my story. He listened to me intently. "Do you mind if I touch your scar? It's quite beautiful, you know. Quite fascinating, really." "Now you are joking," I laugh. "My scar is ugly." The man stroked my scar, and he still does that today. "You are very beautiful, and so is your scar. You should be proud of what it represents. It's a badge of honor that expresses bravery, courage, tenacity." He was seeing my scar in the way that the Bigfoot had done. No wonder I married the man. These days I ask him if he notices my scar at all, and he says no. When he looks at me, he sees me. And now when I look at myself in the mirror, I don't hate what I see anymore. Quite literally, that Bigfoot brought the shy, retiring, frightened woman out of her shell. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.